The wedding photos still haunted her. In one frame, captured just after the vows, Aisha's veil fluttered in the breeze as she laughed up at him. Zayn, tall and golden in his sherwani, eyes locked on hers like she was the only light in the world. Their foreheads touched, smiles wide, hands intertwined. Everyone had said it, perfect match. Meant to be. She'd believed it too. That night, in the honeymoon suite overlooking the glittering city lights, he'd kissed her deeply, whispered promises against her skin. "Forever starts now," he'd said. Then the door closed behind them. And everything stopped. Aisha stared at the ceiling in the dim glow of the bedside lamp, the silk sheets cool against her bare legs. Zayn lay on his side of the king-sized bed, back turned, breathing slow and deliberate, like he was already asleep. She reached out once, fingertips brushing his shoulder. "My body, my choice," he murmured without turning. Voice flat. Final. She froze. She tried again the next morning, playful at first, sliding her hand under his shirt while coffee brewed. He caught her wrist, gentle but firm, and set it aside. "Boundaries, Aisha. Respect them." She laughed nervously. "We're married. Doesn't change consent." The word landed like a slap she couldn't see coming. Weeks blurred into a strange, suffocating routine. They ate breakfast together. He kissed her cheek goodbye before work. Chaste, polite, like greeting a colleague. At night he came home, showered, changed into pajamas, and climbed into bed with at least 2 feet of empty mattress between them. No cuddling. No casual touches. No sex. Nothing. Whenever she tried to talk about it, softly, carefully, he repeated the same script. "My body, my choice. I'm not in the mood. Don't pressure me. You're making me uncomfortable." The guilt twisted in her gut. Was she being selfish? Pushy? Had marriage turned her into someone she didn't recognize? She started questioning her own reflection, running hands over hips and breasts she used to love, wondering when they'd become undesirable. She lost weight. Sleep became shallow. Friends asked why she looked tired. She smiled and said wedding planning stress lingered. No one pushed. But the nights were the worst. Pexels.com, a lonely woman sitting on the bed, free stock photo. She would lie awake listening to his even breathing, feeling the vast cold space between them like an ocean. Sometimes she cried silently into her pillow so he wouldn't hear. Other times she stared at his back, memorizing the curve of his shoulders, wondering who this stranger was who wore her husband's face. Then came the small cracks. Zayn started staying late at the office. Legitimate at first, project deadlines, he said. But the excuses grew thinner. Client dinner. Team drinks. He came home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers, cologne reapplied too heavily. His phone, once left carelessly on the counter, now traveled with him everywhere, even to the bathroom. The screen face down. Notifications silenced. One night she woke at 2:37 a.m. to the soft blue glow lighting his side of the bed. Alami.com, cheating husband phone in bed, high-res stock photography and images. Alami. He was propped against the headboard, scrolling, thumb moving fast. A small smile played on his lips, the same smile he used to give her during late-night talks before the wedding. She pretended to sleep, heart hammering. The next morning she asked casually, "Who were you texting so late?" He didn't even flinch. "Work group chat. Some idiot client in a different time zone." She nodded, said nothing. But something inside her shifted. No more tears. No more begging. Just quiet, burning curiosity. She began noticing patterns. The work trips, that conveniently fell on weekends when she visited her parents. The new gym membership he never used, but came home flushed and showered anyway. The password change on his secondary email she'd once had access to, just in case. She didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead she waited. One evening he announced he had to fly to Karachi for a critical meeting. 3 days. He packed light. Too light for business, she thought. She helped fold his shirts, smiling sweetly, kissing his cheek goodbye at the airport drop-off. The moment his car disappeared around the corner, she drove straight home. She knew his laptop password hadn't changed. He still used their wedding date for everything sentimental. She opened his browser in incognito. Nothing. Then she checked the regular history he never cleared. Hotel bookings. Not in Karachi. Lahore. Same weekend. A boutique hotel she recognized. Romantic, discreet, the kind couples booked for secret getaways. Her stomach dropped, but she didn't cry. She kept digging. Credit card statements. He never noticed she had access to the joint account alerts. Dinner reservations for two at places they'd never gone together. A lingerie store receipt. Size small, black lace, nothing like what she wore. And then the messages. She didn't need to hack anything. He'd left his iPad synced, notifications popping up when he forgot to log out. One name kept appearing. Tuna. Photos. Laughing selfies in hotel elevators. His arm around a slim waist. Her lips on his cheek. The most recent message, sent that morning before he left. Can't wait to finally have you all to myself again. No pretending this time. Aisha sat on the edge of their bed, staring at the screen until it went dark. Then she laughed, a small broken sound that echoed in the empty room. He'd been right all along. It really was his body, his choice. He chose to give it to someone else. Little did he know, she was about to make some choices of her own. Aisha closed the iPad lid with a soft click that felt louder than a gunshot in the silent house. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes didn't burn. Instead, a strange, crystalline calm settled over her, like the moment after a storm when the air is suddenly too still to breathe. She stood up slowly, walked to the kitchen, and poured herself a glass of water. Drank it in small, deliberate sips. Then she opened her laptop, not his, hers, and began. First, screenshots. Every message thread she could still access before he noticed the iPad had been opened. She captured hotel confirmations, restaurant bills, the lingerie receipt timestamped 2 days after their 3rd-month anniversary. She saved flight itineraries that never mentioned Karachi. She photographed the credit card alerts on her phone, the ones she'd quietly forwarded to her personal email months ago when the late nights first started. Evidence gathered like pieces of broken glass. Sharp, cold, impossible to ignore once collected. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She worked methodically for 3 hours, organizing everything into a password-protected folder labeled simply, Proof. When she finished, she backed it up to an encrypted drive she kept in her jewelry box, hidden behind the velvet lining where her mother's old gold bangles still sat untouched. Then she slept. Not the shallow, tear-soaked sleep of the past months. Dreamless. The kind of rest that comes when a decision has finally been made. Zayn returned Sunday evening, suntanned and smiling, carrying a small box of her favorite pistachio barfi from what he claimed was an airport shop in Karachi. "Missed you," he said, kissing her forehead the same polite way he always did now. She smiled back, soft, warm, practiced. "Missed you too." They ate dinner. He talked about fictional meetings, fictional traffic, fictional delays. She nodded at all the right moments, asked gentle follow-up questions, laughed when he expected her to laugh. He relaxed. His shoulders dropped. His phone stayed face down on the table instead of clutched in his hand. He thought he was winning. That night he reached for her. Not intimately, never that, but to pull her closer in the habitual way married couples do when the lights go out. She let him drape an arm over her waist for exactly 7 seconds before she rolled away. "Boundaries," she murmured, echoing his own words back at him. "Respect them." He stiffened, said nothing, turned over. She stared into the darkness and smiled. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in performance. She cooked his favorite meals. She asked about his day. She wore the clothes he once complimented. Silk kurtas, the emerald earrings he'd given her for Eid. She laughed at his jokes. She touched his arm lightly when passing in the hallway. She never once asked about intimacy, never once let hurt show on her face. He began to soften. The distance between them on the mattress shrank by inches each night. One evening he even pulled her into a hug from behind while she washed dishes, chin resting on her shoulder. Feels like old times, he murmured. She turned in his arms, looked up at him with wide, guileless eyes. Does it? He kissed her then, properly deeply, the way he used to before the wedding band changed everything. Her body responded on instinct. Old muscle memory flared hot and bright. But her mind stayed cold, clinical, watching from a distance. When he pulled back, searching her face for encouragement, she smiled sweetly. Not tonight, she said. I'm tired. His jaw tightened just a flicker before he nodded. Of course. Whenever you're ready. She almost laughed aloud. Whenever you're ready. She was ready now. Just not for what he thought. On their 6-month anniversary, she booked a table at the rooftop restaurant where he'd proposed. Candlelight, city skyline, live ghazal singer in the corner. Romantic. Expensive. Perfect. He arrived in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to the forearms, looking every inch the husband who'd finally come around. He held her chair, ordered champagne, toasted to new beginnings. She clinked her glass against his. To choices, she said. He laughed, not catching the edge in her voice. Halfway through dessert she excused herself to the powder room. When she returned she carried nothing. No purse, no phone, just a thin cream envelope in her hand. He sat, slid the envelope across the table. What's this? He asked, amused. Open it. He did. Photos first, printed in crisp color. Him and Sanaa at the Lahore hotel pool. His hand low on her back. Another of them kissing in an elevator, timestamp visible in the corner. Bank statements highlighted in yellow. Text messages transcribed word for word, including the one about finally having you all to myself again. He went very still. Aisha leaned forward, voice low and pleasant, the same tone she used when discussing weekend plans. You were right, she said. Your body, your choice. You chose not to touch me. You chose her. Repeatedly. For months. While I cooked for you, waited for you, cried for you in the dark so you wouldn't hear. His mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. I chose to, she continued. I chose to document everything. I chose to speak to a lawyer last month. Quietly, no drama. I chose to move half the joint savings into an account with only my name on it. I chose to have the prenup we both signed looked over again. You remember the fidelity clause, don't you? The one your mother insisted on because modern girls can't be trusted. Turns out it works both ways. His face drained of color. I'm filing tomorrow, she said. Irreconcilable differences. Adultery will be noted in the paperwork, though I doubt we'll need to go that far in court. You'll want this quiet, I'm sure. Your family. Your colleagues. Sanaa's husband, perhaps. I haven't decided yet. He finally found his voice. Horse. Aisha, please. We can fix this. It was a mistake. No, she interrupted gently. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something cruel in anger. What you did was deliberate. Repeated. You humiliated me in my own home night after night, while you gave everything you denied me to someone else. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. He stood. Placed her wedding ring on top of the envelope. Simple gold band, no longer warm from her finger. I'll be out by the weekend. My things are already packed. The apartment in Gulberg is leased in my name only. You can keep the house. I don't want it. I don't want anything that reminds me of the months I spent begging for scraps of affection from a man who was too busy giving them away elsewhere. He reached for her wrist. She stepped back smoothly. Don't, she said. Not angry. Just final. The singer in the corner switched to a slower rag. The candle between them flickered. Aisha looked at him one last time, the man she'd once believed would be her forever, and felt nothing but quiet relief. Take care of yourself, Zayn, she said. And next time you tell a woman my body, my choice, make sure you actually believe it applies only when it's convenient for you. She walked away. He didn't follow. Outside, the night air was cool against her skin. She inhaled deeply, tasting freedom for the first time in months. Her phone buzzed once, a message from her lawyer confirming tomorrow's filing appointment. She smiled into the darkness. Little did he know. She was just getting started. The days after the restaurant confrontation unfolded like a slow, deliberate unraveling. Zane didn't rage. He didn't beg on his knees or smash things. Instead, he went quiet, dangerously quiet. The first night, he came home late, reeking of whiskey and cigarette smoke he hadn't touched since college. He stood in the doorway of their bedroom, staring at the half-empty closet where her kurtas and dupattas used to hang. "You really did it," he said, voice flat. Aisha was folding the last of her clothes into a suitcase. She didn't look up. "I told you I would." He laughed once, short, bitter. "You think this makes you strong? Walking away because of one mistake." She paused, fingers tightening on a silk scarf he'd bought her in Istanbul during their engagement trip. One mistake would have been forgivable. 6 months of lies while I slept next to a stranger. That's not a mistake, Zane. That's a pattern. He stepped closer. "I was going to end it. Swear. It was just pressure. Work. The wedding happened so fast. I needed space." "Space," she repeated softly. "You had the entire bed. You had our home. You had me begging for the smallest touch. And you chose to take your space in hotel rooms with another woman." His jaw worked. "Sana was." "Don't," she cut in, sharper than she intended. "Don't say her name like it explains anything. I don't care who she was to you. I care who you were to me." He reached for the suitcase lid, trying to close it, as if stopping her packing would stop time. She pushed his hand away, calm but unyielding. "I'm leaving in the morning," she said. "The movers are coming at 10. Anything you want to keep from my things, take it now." He stared at her like she'd become someone he didn't recognize. Maybe she had. The next morning he was gone before the movers arrived, probably at his parents' house or Sana's apartment, licking wounds he still refused to admit were self-inflicted. Aisha supervised the packing with mechanical efficiency. She left the furniture, the wedding gifts, the framed photos. She took only what was hers before the marriage. Books, clothes, her grandmother's silver, the small safe containing her own savings and jewelry. When the last box was loaded, she stood in the empty living room and looked around one final time. The space felt smaller now, stripped of illusion. She locked the door behind her, dropped the keys into the mailbox as agreed with the lawyer, and drove away without looking back. The new apartment in Gulberg was small. 2 bedrooms, modest balcony, nothing like the sprawling defense house they'd shared. But it was quiet. Worse, no ghosts in the mattress. No invisible wall down the center of the bed. She spent the first week sleeping 12 hours a night, exhaustion finally catching up. When she woke, she didn't reach for him. She made coffee for one. She read novels she'd abandoned months ago. She cried once, hard, ugly sobs in the shower, then never again. The lawyer called on the 3rd day. "He's contesting the division of assets. Claims the prenup is unconscionable, and that you trapped him emotionally." Aisha laughed, genuine this time. "Let him try. Every message, every receipt, every hotel booking is time-stamped. If he wants discovery, he'll get it. Publicly." The lawyer paused. "You sure you want to go nuclear? Mediation could be quieter." "I gave him quiet for 6 months," she said. "He didn't want it." Word spread slowly at first, then in a rush. Mutual friends texted awkward apologies. His mother called once, voice trembling with indignation. "How could you humiliate my son like this? In public? With those pictures?" Aisha kept her tone even. "Ask him how he humiliated his wife for half a year. I didn't put anything on social media. I didn't need to. The truth found its way out." His sister, the one who'd been her closest confidant during the engagement, sent a single message. "I'm sorry. I knew something was wrong. I should have said something." Aisha didn't reply. Forgiveness would come later, if ever. For now, she protected what little energy she had left. 3 weeks after she moved out, Zane showed up at her new building unannounced. He looked thinner, eyes shadowed. The golden groom from the wedding photos replaced by someone hollowed out. "Can we talk?" he asked from the lobby intercom. She buzzed him up. He stood in her doorway, hands in pockets, refusing to meet her eyes. "I ended it with her. Completely. Blocked her everywhere. I want to come home." Aisha leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "This is home now. I know I fucked up. I know I hurt you. But we can fix it. Counseling. Whatever you need." She studied him. The man who once promised her forever. Who'd once looked at her like she hung the moon. Now he looked like a boy caught stealing. "You didn't just hurt me," she said quietly. "You erased me. Night after night, you made me invisible in my own marriage. You used beautiful words, consent, boundaries, choice, to justify cruelty. And the moment I used those same words to protect myself, you want them back." He swallowed. "I didn't realize." "You did," she interrupted. "You knew exactly what you were doing. Every time I reached for you and you turned away, you knew. Every time you came home from her bed and kissed my forehead like nothing happened, you knew. Don't pretend surprise now." Silence stretched between them. "I still love you," he whispered. The words should have broken her. Months ago they would have. Now they landed like rain on stone. "I loved you too," she said. "Enough to stay. Enough to beg. Enough to believe your excuses. But love isn't enough when it's only coming from one side." She stepped back. "Go home, Zane. Not to our house, to wherever you belong now. And when the papers come, sign them. Don't drag this out. You've already taken enough of my time." He opened his mouth, closed it, nodded once, turned and left. The door clicked shut. She exhaled, a long, shuddering breath, and slid down the wall until she sat on the floor. Not crying, just breathing, feeling the weight lift ounce by ounce. Months passed. The divorce finalized quietly in January. She kept her savings, her jewelry, a modest alimony settlement he fought but ultimately conceded. He kept the house, the car, most of the furniture. She didn't care. She wanted none of it. She started working again. Freelance graphic design, something she'd paused after the engagement. Clients came slowly, then steadily. She reconnected with old friends who hadn't been part of their couple circle. She traveled alone to the northern hills, stood on mountain trails and screamed into the wind until her throat was raw. One evening, 6 months after the restaurant, she sat on her balcony with a cup of chai and watched the city lights flicker on. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It was Sana. "Sorry. I didn't know he was married at first. When I found out, I should have walked away. I didn't. That's on me. Hope you're okay." Aisha stared at the screen for a long time. Then she typed one line. "Him." She hit delete. Blocked the number. Set the phone down. The night air was cool. A crescent moon hung low. Somewhere in the distance, someone played an old Noor Jahan song. Soft, wistful, full of longing. Aisha smiled into the darkness. She no longer needed anyone's permission to feel whole. Little did he know she never had. The divorce decree arrived on a gray February morning, exactly 1 year and 17 days after the wedding. Aisha opened the envelope at her small kitchen table, chai steaming beside her laptop. The paper was thin, official, stamped with a family court seal. Irreconcilable differences. No fault on the surface. The adultery notations tucked quietly into the supporting affidavits she'd never had to present in open court. Zane had folded the moment his lawyer saw the full folder of evidence. She read the final line twice. "The marriage is hereby dissolved." No fanfare. No tears. Just a soft exhale, like releasing a breath she'd been holding since the honeymoon suite. She folded the papers neatly, slid them into a drawer labeled "closed," and went back to work. A new client had emailed overnight, a boutique fashion label wanting rebranding. She lost herself in mood boards and color palettes for 3 hours, the kind of focused flow she hadn't felt in years. Life rebuilt itself in small, stubborn pieces. Mornings. Alarm at 6:30, black coffee, 30 minutes of yoga on the balcony while the city slowly woke. She'd bought a cheap rubber mat and a second-hand speaker. Old Qawwali tracks filled the air while she stretched. Her body felt hers again, no longer waiting for permission to be touched, held, desired. Afternoons. Client calls, revisions, invoicing. Money came in steadily now. Not lavish but enough. Enough to pay rent without glancing at joint account alerts. Enough to buy herself flowers on Fridays just because the stall near the metro station smelled like jasmine and possibility. Evenings. Walks in the small park behind her building. She started recognizing faces. The elderly uncle who fed stray cats, the college girls practicing dance routines under the neem trees, the woman in her 50s who power-walked every day with noise-canceling headphones and fierce determination. Aisha nodded hello. Sometimes they nodded back. Small connections, no pressure. She dated once. A kind architect named Bilal, introduced through a mutual friend. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner into long conversations about art and cities and the things people carry quietly. He was gentle, funny, attentive. When he kissed her goodnight outside her building, soft, asking, no demand, she felt warmth bloom in her chest instead of panic. But when he asked to see her again, she hesitated. "I like you," she told him honestly over the phone the next day. "But I'm still recalibrating. I don't want to bring old ghosts into something new." He didn't push. "I get it. When you're ready or if you ever are, text me." No expiration date. She appreciated that most of all. No timeline. No scorekeeping. Zayn tried twice more to reach her after the decree. First, a long email from an address she didn't recognize. Subject: "I'm different now." She read the first paragraph, apologies, therapy, promises of change, then deleted it unread. She didn't need his redemption arc. She'd already written her own. Second, a bouquet delivered to her office. White roses, her once favorite. The card read only, "I miss what we could have been." She carried the vase to the building's reception and asked the guard to distribute them to anyone who wanted them. She kept the card though. Not out of sentiment. She pinned it inside her journal next to the single line she'd written the night she left. "I choose me." Time did its quiet work. 1 year after moving out, she traveled alone to Hunza. No group tour, no companion. Just her, a rented jeep, and a backpack. She drove the Karakoram highway at dawn, windows down, wind whipping her dupatta. She stopped at viewpoints that made her breath catch. Snow-dusted peaks against impossible blue, rivers the color of glacial milk. At night she stayed in small goose houses, ate walnut bread and apricot jam, listened to locals tell stories of ancient forts and starlit weddings. On her last evening, she hiked to Eagle's Nest alone. The sun dipped behind Rakaposhi, painting the valley in rose and gold. She sat on a flat rock, legs dangling over the drop, and for the first time in years felt no ache of absence. No phantom hand she wished would reach for hers. Just her heartbeat, steady against the vast silence. She took out her phone, not to call anyone, just to capture the moment. One photo. The valley, the light, her shadow long across the stone. She didn't post it. She sent it to herself with the caption, "This is enough." Back in Lahore, spring arrived with dust storms and mango season. Aisha started a small side project, a digital archive of women's oral histories from Punjab. She interviewed her neighbor's mother about partition, recorded the park auntie's memories of learning to drive in the 1970s when women weren't supposed to, sat with a retired schoolteacher who'd secretly taught girls to read during Zia's time. Their voices filled her evenings, strong, cracked, laughing, defiant. She began to speak at small events, book clubs, university seminars, women's circles in community centers. She never framed her story as tragedy. She told it plainly. "I was married to a man who used beautiful principles to justify selfish cruelty. I stayed too long because I believed love meant endurance. Then I learned that love, of self, of others, of life, sometimes means walking away." The room always went quiet after that. Then questions. Then hugs. Then messages weeks later. Your story gave me courage. She didn't see herself as a hero. She was just a woman who'd stopped apologizing for wanting to be wanted. 2 years after the divorce, she met someone again. Not through friends this time. At a literature festival where she was moderating a panel on memoir and truth-telling. His name was Rehan, a translator of Urdu poetry into English, quiet, bespectacled, with laugh lines that appeared only when he was genuinely amused. He asked thoughtful questions during the Q&A, stayed afterward to thank her, then, hesitantly, asked if she'd like to grab chai sometime to talk more about foies and feminism. She said yes. Their first date lasted 5 hours. Chai became dinner, became walking the empty mall road at midnight, debating whether Caleb was more heartbroken or hopeful. When he dropped her home, he didn't try to kiss her. He simply said, "I like the way you think, and the way you listen. I'd like to do this again if you want." She wanted. They moved slowly. Coffee dates, book exchanges, long drives to the Ravi River just to watch kingfishers dive. He never asked about her past marriage until she brought it up herself, months later, over rooftop pizza during a power outage. "I was married once," she said, watching candlelight flicker across his face. "It ended because he chose not to choose me. Every day. Until I chose myself instead." Rehan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he reached across the table, not to hold her hand, but to turn it palm up and trace the faint scar from a childhood burn she'd always hidden. "You're not broken," he said quietly. "You're rebuilt. Stronger in the places that were cracked." She cried then, not from pain, but from the simple relief of being seen without being pitted. They didn't rush. When intimacy finally came, slow, careful, full of whispered questions and easy laughter, it felt like rediscovery, not reclamation. No ghosts in the sheets. Just 2 people choosing each other in real time. One evening, 3 years after the restaurant confrontation, Aisha received a wedding invitation in the mail. Not hers. Ain's. Sana. Gold-embossed card, venue in Murray. Date circled in red by someone who clearly still hoped for reconciliation drama. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she walked to her balcony, struck a match, and burned it carefully over an old steel bowl. The ashes drifted down like dark snow. She didn't feel anger. She didn't feel triumph. She felt finished. Rehan found her there, watching the last embers die. "Old mail?" he asked. "Old chapter," she said. He slipped his arms around her from behind. She leaned back against his chest, listening to his heartbeat sync with hers. "Happy," he murmured into her hair. She turned in his arms, looked up at the man who'd never once made her beg for affection, who'd never used her own values as a weapon against her. "More than happy," she said. "Whole." The city lights glittered below them, endless and alive. Somewhere in another part of Lahore, Zain was probably standing in a tailor shop getting fitted for another sherwani, telling himself this time would be different. Aisha smiled into Rehan's shoulder. Little did he know. She'd already won the only story that mattered. Hers. The invitation's ashes had long since blown away, but the calendar kept turning. 4 years after the divorce, Aisha turned 32 in a quiet way that suited her. No party. No cake with too many candles. Just Rehan, a bottle of chilled rose on the balcony, and a playlist of old Coke studio tracks that made them both laugh at how young they'd once felt. He gave her a slim volume of translated Mirza Ghalib ghazals, the margins already filled with his neat pencil notes, translations of longing, of separation, of eventual dawn. She read one aloud while the city hummed below. "Every heart that has known love carries its own grave inside it. Yet look, still it beats." Rehan watched her face as she spoke the lines. "You used to say you'd never read poetry again after everything," he said softly. "Said it felt too dangerous." She closed the book, fingers lingering on the cover. "It was. When pain is fresh, beauty stings. Now it just reminds me I survived the sting." They made love that night with the slowness of people who know time is no longer the enemy. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets that smelled of jasmine oil and each other, She traced the faint scar on his collarbone, a childhood fall from a bicycle, and asked the question she'd carried for months. Do you ever wonder if I'm still carrying pieces of him? Rehan turned onto his side, propping his head on one hand. I wonder if you're carrying the lessons, not the man. There's a difference. She searched his eyes, steady, unguarded, and felt the last knot in her chest loosen. I don't hate him anymore, she admitted. I don't even think about him most days. But sometimes I catch myself waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to withdraw, for affection to become a weapon again. He took her hand, pressed it to his chest so she could feel the calm rhythm beneath her palm. I'm not him. And if I ever start to feel like him, even for a second, you tell me. We fix it. Or we end it clean. But I won't make you guess where I stand. She believed him. Not because he promised perfection. Because he promised honesty. Life settled into a rhythm that felt earned rather than borrowed. Rehan moved in 6 months later. Not with fanfare, but with practicality. He brought his bookshelves, his ancient espresso machine. His habit of leaving poetry post-its on the fridge. She learned to share closet space again, to negotiate whose turn it was to cook dal, to wake up to the sound of someone humming while making chai. Small domestic things that once terrified her now felt like proof she could rebuild trust brick by brick. Professionally, the oral history project grew legs. What began as weekend recordings became a small non-profit. They received a modest grant from a women's empowerment foundation in Islamabad. Aisha hired 2 young researchers, both women in their 20s who reminded her of the version of herself that still believed love conquered everything. They traveled to villages outside Bawalpur, Multan DG Khan, sitting with grandmothers on charpoys, recording stories of resilience stitched into everyday survival. One afternoon in a sun-baked courtyard near Yuk Sharif, an elderly woman named Bibi Razia gripped Aisha's wrist after the recorder clicked off. You're the one from the videos, she said, eyes sharp despite the cataracts. The one who left the man who wouldn't touch her. Aisha blinked. Word traveled differently in these parts. Slow, oral, unfiltered. Bibi Razia patted her hand. Good. You didn't let shame keep you small. My mother stayed 40 years with a man like that. Said it was her duty. Died never knowing what it felt like to be chosen every day. Don't waste the life you took back. Aisha carried those words home like talismans. She began speaking at larger venues. Universities in Karachi and Islamabad, NGO conferences. Even a TEDx-style event in Lahore where the red circle on the floor felt too bright and the spotlight too hot. She never used Zain's name. Never showed photos. She spoke instead about the architecture of emotional withholding. How it masquerades as principle, how it erodes self-worth drop by drop, how leaving is not failure but precision surgery. Cutting away what poisons to save what remains. The talks always ended the same way. Choice is not a weapon, she said, voice steady. It is oxygen. When someone uses your own language of consent and boundaries to starve you of intimacy while feeding it to someone else, they are not protecting themselves. They are practicing cruelty with better vocabulary. And you are allowed, no required, to protect yourself with the same clarity. Applause followed, but she never lingered for the after-parties. She went home to Rehan, to quiet dinners, to nights where the only thing asked of her was presence. 5 years after the restaurant, Zain's second marriage ended. She didn't hear it from him. Sanaa's cousin, someone she'd once considered a distant friend, messaged her on Instagram late one night. He's not doing well. Drinks too much. Lost his job 6 months ago. Blames everyone but himself. Sanaa left last month. Said she couldn't keep carrying both of them. I know you don't owe him anything. Just thought you should know. In case you ever cared. Aisha stared at the message for a long time. Then she replied, I hope he finds peace. Truly do. But that peace isn't my responsibility anymore. She blocked the account. Rehan found her sitting on the balcony afterward, phone dark in her lap. Bad news, he asked. Old news, she said. Someone else's chapter closing. He sat beside her. They watched the city breathe. Traffic lights blinking, minarets silhouetted against sodium glow, the occasional burst of laughter from a late-night wedding procession somewhere down the road. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked after a while. "Not fighting harder to save the first marriage?" She shook her head. "I regret the months I spent trying to convince someone to want me. I regret believing that endurance was the same as love. But leaving? Never. That was the first honest thing I did for myself in a long time." He kissed her temple. "I'm glad you did." They sat in companionable silence until the muezzin's call for far drifted across the rooftops. Clear, unhurried, calling the faithful to prayer and the sleepless to hope. Aisha stood, stretched, and offered him her hand. "Come to bed. Dawn's coming." Inside, they moved through the familiar dark, brushing teeth, changing into soft cotton, sliding under the covers. Rayhan pulled her close, not possessively, but the way someone does when they know the other person will still be there in the morning. She fell asleep listening to his breathing, steady as a metronome. No walls between them. No invisible lines. Just two people who had chosen each other. Not once in a fever of romance, but every day since. 6 years after the divorce, Aisha published her first book. Not a memoir. Not quite. A collection of the oral histories, interwoven with her own reflections on choice, consent, and the courage it takes to walk away from a love that has become a cage. The title was simple: Oxygen. It sold modestly at first, mostly through word of mouth in women's reading groups and university syllabi. Then a prominent columnist reviewed it. Then a podcast. Then foreign rights offers trickled in. She found herself on panels beside writers she'd once admired from afar, speaking not as a victim but as someone who had mapped her own escape route. At the launch event in Lahore, the room was full, standing room only. Friends, former interviewees, young women clutching copies with post-its bristling from the pages. Rayhan stood at the back, arms crossed, smiling the quiet smile he saved only for her. When it was time for questions, a girl no older than 20 stood up, voice trembling but clear. "How did you know when it was time to leave?" Aisha looked at her, really looked, and saw every version of herself that had ever asked the same thing in the mirror. "When staying hurt more than leaving," she said. "When the person who promised to choose you every day stopped choosing you at all. When you realized that love doesn't require you to disappear in order to exist." The girl nodded, tears shining but not falling. Aisha closed with the words she now carried like a compass. "You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Especially when that someone has already chosen to stand in the cold with someone else." The applause was warm, sustained. Afterward, people lined up to sign books. She wrote messages of encouragement, drew tiny hearts next to names, hugged strangers who whispered "thank you," like it was a secret they'd kept too long. When the last person left, Rayhan walked over, handed her a fresh chai in a paper cup. "Proud of you," he said simply. She leaned into him, exhausted and exhilarated. "Proud of us," she corrected. Outside, the night was soft with spring. Jasmine climbed the walls of the bookstore. Somewhere a wedding band played. Off-key trumpets, laughter, the bright clatter of doll. Aisha looked up at the sky. No stars visible through the city haze, but she knew they were there. She had once believed her story ended the night she walked out of that restaurant. She had been wrong. It had only just begun. And little did anyone know, least of all the man who once thought he could define her worth. She had become the author of a life so full it no longer needed anyone's permission to shine. 7 years after the divorce, Aisha stood on the stage of a modest auditorium in Bawalpur. Her childhood city, the one she had avoided for so long after the wedding that never truly began. The invitation had come from a local women's college. "Share your story. Our students need to hear what real strength looks like." She had almost declined. Bawalpur still carried the scent of old shame. Mosque minarets she used to pass hand in hand with her mother, the narrow lanes where neighbors once whispered congratulations on her perfect match. Returning felt like stepping back into a photograph she had already torn in half. But she came. The hall was packed. Young women mostly, dupattas in bright colors, notebooks open, phones recording. A few older faces in the back, Teachers, mothers, one or two aunts who might have known her family. The principal introduced her simply. Aisha, writer, oral historian, survivor. No title of victim. No mention of marriage or divorce. Just survivor. She stepped to the microphone without notes. The lights were soft. The air smelled of chalk dust and anticipation. I used to think love was measured by how much you could endure, she began. I measured it in nights spent crying quietly so my husband wouldn't wake. In mornings when I smiled and asked how his day would be, even though I already knew he'd spend it with someone else. I measured it in the way I shrank myself smaller and smaller until I almost disappeared. The room was so quiet she could hear the ceiling fan blades cutting air. Then one day I understood. Endurance is not love. It is surrender. And I was tired of surrendering to someone who had already surrendered me. She told them about the restaurant. Envelope. The ring left on the table like an exhausted period at the end of a very long sentence. She told them about the months that followed. How silence from him felt louder than any argument ever could. How she rebuilt a life in small, stubborn acts. Learning to sleep in the middle of the bed, buying plants she didn't have to ask permission to water, writing sentences no one had to approve. I didn't leave because I stopped loving him, she said. I left because I started loving myself more. And that love demanded honesty. It demanded oxygen. A hand rose in the third row, a girl with glasses and a nervous smile. Did you ever doubt yourself? After you left? Every day for the first year, Aisha answered without hesitation. Doubt is the shadow that follows decision. But doubt is not proof you were wrong. It's proof you cared enough to question. Another question, quieter. Do you ever miss him? Aisha paused, not for effect, but to let the truth settle inside her first. I miss who I thought he was. The version before the mask slipped. I don't miss the man who chose cruelty and called it principle. There's a difference between nostalgia and longing. Nostalgia fades. Longing starves you. When the talk ended, the applause was warm, not thunderous. She preferred it that way, real rather than performative. Afterward, a cluster of students gathered. One slipped a folded note into her hand before hurrying away. Aisha opened it in the corridor outside. Thank you. My fiancé says the same things your husband did. My choice. My space. I'm scared to leave, but I'm more scared to stay and become you before he left. Reading your book made me realize I deserve the middle of the bed too. Aisha folded the note carefully and tucked it into her purse beside the Caleb volume Rehan had given her years ago. She would answer it later. Privately, thoughtfully, the way she answered every message that arrived in her inbox now. Rehan waited outside in the car, windows down, Urdu ghazals playing low. He didn't ask how it went. He simply reached over and squeezed her hand once she settled into the passenger seat. Home, he asked. Home, she agreed. They drove through the old streets she once knew by heart. Past the canal where she used to feed bread to fish as a child. Past the sweet shop that still sold the same pistachio barfi Zayn once brought her as apology. She felt no pang. Only faint recognition, like passing an old school building after decades. At the small guest house where they were staying the night, Rehan made chai on the electric kettle while she showered away the day's dust. When she emerged in a cotton kurta, hair damp, he handed her a cup and sat beside her on the narrow balcony. You were brilliant today, he said. I was honest, she corrected. That's easier when you're no longer afraid of the truth. They watched the moon rise over flat rooftops and date palms. Somewhere nearby a wedding doll echoed. Joyful, relentless, full of hope that felt both distant and possible. Aisha leaned her head on his shoulder. I used to think my story ended when I walked out of that restaurant, she murmured. But it didn't. It just changed narrators. Rehan kissed the top of her head. And the new narrator is writing something beautiful. She smiled into the night. Little did anyone know, not the man who once withheld his touch, not the woman who once carried his secret, not even the girl who left a note in her hand, that the story had never been about loss. It had always been about reclamation. And reclamation, once begun, does not stop at survival. becomes joy. Quiet, stubborn, unshakable joy. 8 years after the divorce, Aisha received the call she had never expected. It came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in late spring, while she was proofreading the manuscript of her second book, a collection of essays on consent, silence, and the architecture of reclaimed desire. The phone vibrated once on the wooden table beside her chai cup. Unknown number. Bawalpur area code. She almost let it go to voicemail. Then something, intuition perhaps, or the faint echo of unfinished business, made her answer. Aisha. The voice was thinner than she remembered, cracked at the edges like dry earth. She set the red pen down carefully. Yes. Long pause. Traffic noise in the background, the low honk of a rickshaw, someone calling out vegetable prices. I'm in the hospital, he said finally. Liver. Not good. They say maybe months. Maybe less. She didn't speak. She waited. I didn't call to ask for anything, he continued, words tumbling faster now, as if he feared she would hang up. I needed to say it. Sorry. Not the easy sorry. The real one. I destroyed us. I knew what I was doing every time I turned away, every time I lied, every time I used those words. My body, my choice, like armor. I weaponized them. Against you. Against myself, eventually. Another pause. A nurse's voice murmured something unintelligible in the background. I see it now, he said. Too late. Sana left. My family, they're tired. I'm alone here. And I keep thinking about that night in the restaurant. The way you looked at me, not angry, not broken. Just finished. Like I'd finally become someone you didn't recognize. That look haunts me more than anything. Aisha stared at the paragraph she had been marking. The sentence read, silence is not neutrality. It is a choice with consequences. I don't expect forgiveness, he went on. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that I understand what I took from you. Yours, trust, the right to feel safe in your own skin. I stole them. And I can't give them back. She let the silence stretch. Not out of cruelty. Out of precision. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, measured. The same tone she used when addressing a room of strangers who needed to hear hard truths. I heard you, she said. I accept that you're sorry. Not because it changes anything between us, it can't. But because carrying that weight alone is punishment enough. You don't get absolution from me, Zane. You get clarity. You hurt someone who loved you with everything she had. You chose convenience over courage, lies over intimacy, escape over repair. That choice shaped the rest of your life. Mine too. But mine turned toward light. Yours didn't. She heard his breathing catch. I'm not glad you're sick, she continued. I'm not glad you're suffering. I wish you healing, if not of body, then of whatever part of you still knows how to feel remorse. But I won't visit. I won't call again. This conversation is the last bridge between us. After this, there is only separate shorelines. A soft sound, half sob, half exhale, came through the line. Thank you, he whispered. For answering. For saying it plain. Goodbye, Zane. She ended the call. For several minutes she sat motionless, watching dust motes drift in the shaft of sunlight slanting through the window. Then she stood, walked to the balcony, and leaned against the railing. The city moved below her. Children chasing a kite, a vegetable cart rattling over uneven bricks, women in bright shalwar kameez laughing as they passed. Rehan found her there 20 minutes later, arms wrapped around herself though the afternoon was warm. Everything okay? He asked quietly. She turned to him. Zane called. He's dying. Rehan didn't flinch, didn't offer platitudes. He simply stepped closer and waited. He wanted to apologize. Properly. Said he understands now what he did. And you? I told him I heard him. That I accept the remorse exists. But I don't owe him peace. I owe myself the boundary I finally learned to hold. Rehan nodded once. Do you need anything? She considered the question seriously. I need to finish this chapter today. Then I need to take a long walk. Then I need dinner with you, something simple, something we've made together. And tomorrow I need to keep going. He smiled the small, steady smile she had come to rely on. All of that can be arranged. They did exactly that. She finished the chapter, wrote the final sentence with deliberate care. The most powerful choice we ever make is not who we love, but who we allow to keep loving us when they have already shown us they will not. They walked in the evening along the canal path near their apartment, hands linked, speaking little. Dinner was khichdi and yogurt, eaten on the floor because the table felt too formal for the mood. Afterward they sat on the couch, her head in his lap while he read aloud from a new translation of Parveen Shakir. The words wrapped around them like soft cotton. Later in bed, she turned to him in the dark. "I'm not shaken," she said. "I thought I might be. But I'm not." "I know," he answered. "You've already mourned the man he could have been. What's left is just a stranger's regret." She kissed him then, slow, grateful, present. No ghosts, no echoes. Just the two of them, choosing each other in the quiet hours. 9 months later, a small obituary appeared in the local paper. Zain Ahmed, 38. Survived by his parents and one sister. No mention of wives. No mention of causes. Just dates and a line of scripture about mercy. Aisha read it once, folded the newspaper neatly, and placed it in the recycling bin. She didn't attend the funeral. She didn't send flowers. She didn't speak his name aloud again. Instead, she finished her second book. She traveled with Rehan to Swat in autumn, walked among pine trees that smelled like childhood freedom. She laughed more easily, loved more openly, wrote more fiercely. And when people asked, gently, curiously, whether she had found closure, she answered the same way every time. Closure isn't a gift someone else gives you. It's the moment you stop waiting for one. She had stopped waiting long ago. Now she simply lived. Fully. Deliberately. Unapologetically. And in every ordinary morning, chai steaming, sunlight on the page, Rehan's quiet humming from the kitchen, she recognized the truest revenge of all. A life so complete it no longer needed an enemy to define its edges. Little did he know, even in the end, he had never been the center of her story. She was. Always had been. If this story of betrayal, resilience, and quiet triumph resonated with you, consider subscribing to stay connected for more raw, empowering narratives like Aisha's. Stories that remind us reclaiming our worth is never too late. Hit that subscribe button below, and let's keep turning pain into power, one honest chapter at a time.